Today, it's my great pleasure to speak to Kristopher Kunasingam, who is Special Counsel and heads up our migration team at Hall & Wilcox. Chris, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Fay.
Today, we thought it would be a great idea to ask Chris all the burning questions that we've been receiving from employer clients and responding to one at a time. And in particular, looking down the barrel of what 2021 looks like. Chris, what do you consider to be the top migration trends for 2021 and what industries are expected to grow in particular?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Fay. I'll start off first with the trends for 2021. I would say when 2020 first kicked in, it was business as usual for a large start of the year. And then when COVID happened, everything got disrupted. Since then, 6 months has passed, obviously. We're seeing a resumption of a lot of the trends for 2020 carry through. And in particular, the visa program continues to be active. So immigration continues to accept applications. And we also continue to see that some of the regulations which were in place in 2020 will carry on to 2021. So whatever immigration we're planning on changing in 2020 will not probably happen anytime soon. The one unfortunate trend we see, which will probably follow through to 2021, is longer processing. So what I mean by that is if anyone is currently outside of Australia applying for a visa, it's taking them a bit of time to actually get the visa itself. And this is understandable. It's in light of COVID and in light of the restrictions in place, immigration are just not rushing to process these applications. We foresee that continuing on in 2021 as well. So everyone just needs to be probably aware that if you were to lodge an application today, be prepared to wait for months before we hear from immigration on the application. Immigration's not given a time frame as to how long it'll take, but we'll say conservatively 6 to 8 months, unfortunately, at the least, all right? To come then to your second question, Faye, about industries which are expected to grow in 2021. Now, we probably will see further insight on this after the budget is announced in October, because that then allows us to see where the government plans on allocating a lot of its funds to. But what we know for now is industries like in the IT, healthcare, sciences, and the biotechnology spaces are probably going to be the ones where the government's going to focus its efforts on. We base that opinion on the fact that a lot of the funding and visa concessions are targeted towards these industries currently. So we foresee that trend to continue into 2021. Another industry which we foresee will receive a bit of concession and a bit of a boost from the government is the aged care industry. Now, obviously with COVID, there's been a disruption to that industry. Enrollment numbers have dropped out. There's just not as many people enrolling themselves into many of the aged care providers. But we see that as a temporary trend. The unfortunate reality, or the fortunate reality, is as our aging population increases, there is just going to continue to be a demand for that industry. From a visa standpoint, there is now going to be the option, or there soon will be the option, of aged care providers sponsoring aged care workers to work in that industry. That had never been the case before. It was meant to happen in 2020. That's been put on hold because of the high unemployment rate. But in the near-term future, we foresee that that will be an occupation where aged care providers can sponsor workers for. So coming back to it, aged care, the IT industry, healthcare, sciences, biotechnology are all key industries where we foresee a lot of growth will be driving the 2021 figures.
That's fascinating, and actually a great overlap with a recent conversation we were having around our healthcare sector around aged care workforces and the need for surge workforce planning.
Yes.
So that's very interesting indeed. In terms of border restrictions and quarantine arrangements, what do you think, next year will look like, and you might need to break it up, I suppose, into quarters or months, because it is difficult to predict for an entire year ahead. And will it, you know, what will we be seeing in terms of overseas travel?
Good question, Faye. So I foresee 2021 having a lot of the 2020 flair in it, in the sense that anyone who will be arriving in the country is probably going to be subject to mandatory hotel quarantine for 14 days. That strategy seems to have been effective in managing numbers and tracing active cases, and I don't think the government's going to be mandating or taking that option away from managing the crisis itself. So in 2021, anyone looking to arrive will probably be subject to a 14-day quarantine period. Now, how long will that be in place? It's hard to say, frankly. I think if COVID numbers continue to drop, if there is quicker testing and coming back on the possible vaccine being developed at the end of this year, that could potentially change the outcome of how long quarantine has to go on for. So at this stage, based on the numbers, based on what we know it's going to be in place for 2021. But with the 3 factors I've just outlined earlier, that could shorten the quarantine period. And also to give you a sense as to the numbers itself, I mean, currently, there are only about 4,000 arrivals a week into Australia. Now, this is going to go up to 6,000 from next week onwards, but that's a pale in comparison to what the figures used to look like before. On average, Australia used to receive 800 to 1 million people a month. And of course, that includes tourism and a few other things as well. But that's a scale as to how drastic it is right now, the reduction of those numbers. So if we want to see some resumption of economic activity, some resumption of normalcy in our lives, we're going to just have to try and bring those numbers up to try and support the various industries. And quarantine will be in place, but if we can get on top of the numbers, we can then start to allow a larger number of people into the country itself, go through the quarantine period, and then be able to assimilate into society.
That's extraordinary. I actually had no idea the numbers were so huge in comparison to what they are now. Okay, so let's take it back a little bit to business-related migration, I suppose, and the things that our employer clients were looking at earlier in the year in terms of changes to business migration visas that were proposed. Are those still anticipated to take place at some stage or some variation to them?
Sure. So many of the changes which were planned for 2020 and even 2021, we foresee will be put on hold for now. And there's a reason behind it. I mean, for many of these changes to come into play, you need to get members of parliament to vote on some of them. So some of the legislation needs to be brought to motion and debated. And right now, there's probably not a lot of attention on it. Budget, unemployment figures, that's probably front of mind of many of the members of parliament. And immigration changes are definitely not key at this moment. So some of the proposed changes will probably be shelved for now. We don't think forever, but just shelved in the near-term future. And which then leads to the fact that any of the planning and any of the policies we know in place right now will carry on into 2021. That's good for employers and business owners because it provides certainty on what we know. There is also another factor here, which is the visa side of things is a fee revenue generation for the government itself. So it is a budget consideration. Anyone who applies for a visa has to pay a fee, employers have to pay a training levy, and all of that is funneled into the federal government's budget. Now, having reduced the number of people being able to travel into the country itself has had an effect on those budget numbers. And I think if the government was to further implement changes which made it more restrictive for people to enter the country, that's going to leave a bigger damage on the budget numbers itself. So coming back to it, I think many of the changes which were planned are going to be shelved. I think many of the policies are going to continue forward to provide certainty and to provide some normalcy for businesses and sponsors to be able to use the visa program itself. Now, that then will again trickle back into a rebalancing of the budget. And then in a couple of years' time, when things are normal, then I think the government will have a go again at revamping some of the requirements.
Well, that's great news for employers. I mean, the last thing they really need at the moment is another form change or acronym to get used to, right? Which is usually what happens when visa legislation changes in particular, migration legislation.
That's right.
So I suppose, just to close it off, are employers expected, or do employers need to operate in a haze at the moment, or is there some workforce planning they can do around their visa workforce, current and anticipated, and some strategies that they can put in effect that anticipate some of these regulatory changes and border restrictions?
Sure. So given that we do not anticipate any major changes going forward from here, I think many of the strategies which employers could need or want to develop should already be in place by now. So as an example of that, when COVID first hit, the government was unsure of how to respond or how they could support some employers with their sponsored workforce. And in May this year, they introduced several concessions that include the permitted reduction of working hours and salary for sponsored workers, and that never used to be in place. So that was all introduced this year, and that was meant to be a temporary measure. It wasn't something permanent, and it was only meant to support employers through this difficult period. So that will probably be rolled back sometime in 2021. So if I was sponsoring someone, I would start performing an audit on my workforce right now, in fact, to just know that whatever policies and strategies I've put into place is going to take me through the short term, but knowing that sometime in 2021, those concessions are not going to be in place. So I need to start thinking about how I need to operate as business as usual sometime in, I would even pull it as the first quarter of 2021. So look at what we've done so far at this stage. Anticipate that a lot of the concessions will be taken away by Q1 2021. And what am I going to do? So I need to start thinking about how I'm going to get my workers back to full-time, my sponsored workers especially, back to full-time employment. And how am I going to operate without these concessions? So start thinking about that now.
That's fantastic. Informative and insightful as always. Thank you so much, Chris. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for having me again, Faye. Have a good day.